Boy, easy question. I'd like to say the world has changed, but in some ways the more it changes, the more it stays the same. But fundamentally, it is a bit different, but as a female principal, I also notice that I am responded to differently than I see male principals being responded to. So I do know that there are structural things that people do, are kind of like an instinctive response to people in different positions. And I do think that male principals have more voice than females, because you don't want to be seen as the whinging woman kind of idea that people might get. But having said all that, I work in Yarra and Darebin, and you probably know that we have both federal and state Green politicians now, which gives you a bit of an indication of the kind of people that live in those areas. So luckily I do work in an area that is a bit more, if you like, leftist leaning, a bit more socially inclusive, and social principles of social justice and so on. So in my role in my area, I probably don't experience quite so much resistance as you might perhaps in a rural area, but I lived in the country, so I kind of know what it's like in the country, but that was a long time ago. So I really don't know the answer, except that it's a discussion point, and we shouldn't stop talking about it, and we shouldn't stop honouring the voices of women and those kinds of things. And I find in this space working with male teachers is also challenging. And it's challenging for them, and Sharon was presenting some things to my staff, and none of the men spoke. No one. Did not ask a question, did not make a comment. And I asked them later on, why was that? Because normally they are kind of dominant. And they were really uncomfortable, because a bit like they've got to shoulder the sins of every man in a way. You can tell I was brought up a Catholic. That's where my social justice comes from, actually. Yeah. There's good things about it. Sorry, I digress. So men often have a response is, what about violence against men? What about the male suicide, you know? What are you going to do about that? Well, I don't think they're mutually exclusive things that you can pay attention to. So I think it's just to keep talking, to keep thinking about it, to keep involving everyone in the discussion. And, you know, I'm sure there are women who are not on board as well. It's not just... I'm not sure if that was implied in your question. It came from male principals, but that's the way I took it. But there's no easy answer. It's a long-term project, very, very long-term.
And I'm just wondering what you think was going on, Pauline, for your male staff in terms of their description of feeling uncomfortable. Was it a discomfort that they were prepared to go with, or that they're resisting?
I think what they felt, and the statistics are really frightening. And so I think if they haven't seen those statistics, they haven't reflected on it, I think you do have a sense of guilt in, why haven't I done anything about this? Do I allow this to happen in my own... Not that I am a perpetrator, but what do I do at the pub? What kind of jokes do I make? What kind of comments do I make? So I think there's a bit of reflection on their own, and we're human beings. We just react in different ways to that sort of stimulus. But talking to them later on, when they'd had time to think about it, I think the response is different. It is more reflective, and it is more, what can I do to help this? And part of my strategy is to invite them onto the leadership team or the implementation. What can they do? And some of them, being fathers and involved in primary schools, do actually join the respectful relationship group at their child's school, because they really want the best for their kid. So, and I find that a really powerful lever, because when they come back to their workplace, they bring that with them. So if I can encourage them to actually be on the leadership of either my school or other schools, that's a really valuable insight for them.
It's sort of getting that real buy-in from them, isn't it?
Can I just add, Emma?
Yeah, please.
I think that with resistance, and I think we need to be engaging men, and I think we need to be engaging families, and I think we need to be engaging students. And I think the best way to be actually doing that is by seeing men, male staff, male students, and our families as actual change makers and as major players in this work. And I think if we approach resistance or potential resistance as a way of bringing people on board and empowering, and that being the centre of, like you touched on, there's a guilt of not being involved and not creating that change. So if we go in and we target schools or staff or males or students or families as a point of intervention, I think that we're very quickly putting people offside. But if it's around come on board and empowerment and reflecting back that you are at a position of being major players in this work, we often, in Barwon at least, see a huge difference in that crowd of engagement, whether that's talking to students or to staff or to families. So yeah, I think if we see schools as a site of intervention, it can be a little bit off-putting.